The lobby of the Cebu Grand Meridian was marble and light, and the particular hum of a building that costs more per night than most people earn in a month. Soledad Bayani was standing in the center of it at 11:43 in the evening, holding a laminated ID card, and security officer Ben Tagalog was standing beside her, saying something she could not hear because the blood in her ears was too loud. 3 minutes ago, she had been on the executive floor, asking a question. 2 minutes ago, Rodrigo Reyes's associate, a man in a gray suit whose name she had not caught, had come out of the suite and told Ben, in the voice of someone who expects to be obeyed immediately, to remove her from the floor. 1 minute ago, Ben had done it, gently, with an apology in his eyes that meant he believed her even if his job required him to act otherwise. Now she was in the lobby. The ID card was in her hand. On it, a photograph of a young man, 30 years old at most, smiling at the camera with the particular directness of someone who has nothing to hide. His name, printed in the font of a company that no longer used that font. Gregorio Bayani, Chief Operations Officer. Bayani and Reyes Marine Engineering. Her father's name. Her father's face. Her father's company, the company whose shortened name, Reyes Marine. Reyes Marine, she had seen it on ship hulls in the Cebu port her entire life. She had never once connected to the name that her grandmother spoke only in whispers, and her own birth certificate listed, and nobody in Tacloban had said out loud in 26 years without lowering their eyes. "Miss Bayani," Ben said carefully, "I need to know what you want me to do." Sol looked at him. She looked at the ID card. She looked at the elevator that led back to the executive floor and the man who was up there right now, behind a door, knowing what she had found. She said, "I want to go back up." Ben was quiet for a moment. "Give me 10 minutes," he said. "I need to pull something first. Before we go any further, type 777 in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. If stories about buried truth and the daughters who refuse to let it stay buried move you, please like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You will not want to miss the ending of this one. Soledad Bayani had been called Sol since before she could remember, because her grandmother Nena said that a name like Soledad, loneliness, was too heavy for a baby, and so she had been Sol from the beginning, which meant son, which Nena said was more accurate anyway. Lola Nina had raised her in Tacloban, in a house on a street that flooded every typhoon season, and had flooded particularly badly in 2013, and had been rebuilt in the years after with the patient stubbornness of people who have decided that where they live is worth the trouble of returning to. Sol's mother had died of dengue fever when Sol was 3. She had no memory of her. She had a single photograph, a woman with Sol's eyes and a smile that looked like it had been practiced until it became genuine, and a story Lola Nena told once a year on her mother's birthday. Because once a year was enough, and more than that made it a wound instead of a memory. Sol's father was the other story. Gregorio Bayani had disappeared when Sol was 2 years old. Lola Nena did not say he left. She did not say he ran. She said he was gone, which was the most accurate word and the least satisfying, because gone tells you nothing about why or where or whether it was chosen or forced or somewhere between the two. What Lola Nena did say, once when Sol was 16, and had asked with the directness of a teenager who has run out of patience for indirect answers, "Sol, the right thing and the easy thing are almost never the same thing. A man is measured by which one he chooses when no one is watching." Then she had looked out the window at the street that flooded every typhoon season, and Sol had understood that this was her father's sentence, that Lola Nena was quoting him, and that the quotation was both the only answer available and the most complete one Lola Nena knew how to give. The only other thing Sol knew about her father came from a clipping she had found in a box under Lola Nena's bed when she was 19, a newspaper article, yellow, from a Cebu business publication dated 30 years ago. The headline, Bayani and Reyes Marine Engineering Executive Gregorio Bayani missing amid government contract irregularities investigation. Not accused. Not arrested. Missing, the distinction had stayed with Sol for 7 years, in the particular way that things stay with you when you are not sure what they mean and have nowhere to take them. She had looked up Bayani and Reyes Marine Engineering. The company, she found, now operated as Reyes Marine, a mid-sized shipbuilding firm with yards in Cebu and Batangas, a government contract record that was by all accounts clean, and a founding history that mentioned one partner by name, Rodrigo Reyes. The other founding partner was listed in the archived company registration as Gregorio Bayani. Sol had found this at 19 and sat with it for 7 years and had not known what to do with it. There was no address to write to. There was no authority to petition. There was only Rodrigo Reyes, a name in a company document, and a grandmother who had said the right thing and the easy thing, and then looked out the window. She had moved to Cebu at 23 for the accounting program and the job at the hotel, and the practical reason that Cebu was where things were, and Tacloban was where she was from, and they were not the same place. She sent money home every month. She called Lola Nena every Sunday. She worked the night shift at the front desk of the Cebu Grand Meridian, which paid better than the day shift and left her mornings for class. She was good at the job. She was precise, calm, accustomed to the specific demands of guests who expected everything immediately and were accustomed to receiving it. She remembered names and preferences without writing them down. She had been given the executive concierge desk 6 months ago, which meant she handled the guests on floors 12 through 15, the guests who needed things that required discretion and competence in equal measure. She had been covering the concierge desk for 3 nights when the booking came through for Suite 1401. Reyes, Rodrigo, booking, 3 nights. Party of 4. Special requests, full floor privacy, no media access, document handling service. She had looked at the name. She had looked at it for a long time. She had checked in the booking and said nothing to anyone. Rodrigo Reyes arrived on a Tuesday evening. He was 71, white-haired, with the build of a man who had spent decades in shipyards and had not gone entirely soft in the years since. He traveled with 2 associates, younger men in business clothes, and a personal secretary named Amalia, who wore reading glasses and managed every detail of his schedule with the brisk efficiency of someone who has been doing it for 20 years. He acknowledged Sol at the desk with the brief nod of a man who registers competence in service staff and expresses it through not complaining. He asked one question: whether the document handling service could accommodate a sensitive delivery the next morning. Sol said yes. She arranged it. She did not say anything about her father. She was not sure she was going to. She spent the rest of the shift telling herself she wasn't sure, which was not entirely true, but was easier than admitting that she had spent 7 years waiting for exactly this proximity to this exact man, and was now terrified of what asking would do to the only stable thing she had, her job, her enrollment in the accounting program, her grandmother's trust in the stories she had been telling herself about her father. On the second night, the document delivery came. A courier arrived at the concierge desk at 7:15 in the evening with a sealed portfolio case and a delivery log that required a witness signature. Sol processed it, called up to the suite, and was told by Amalia that she could bring it up directly. She took the elevator to the 14th floor. Amalia met her at the suite door, took the portfolio, and turned to go back inside. As she turned, the case caught the edge of the door frame, a small collision, a slight fumble, and the case's outer pocket, incompletely zipped, released a single laminated card that skittered across the hallway floor and stopped at Sol's feet. She bent down to pick it up. She looked at it. The ID was from 30 years ago, the kind that companies made before digital badging, laminated in the style of that era, slightly yellowed at the edges, preserved in the outer pocket of a document case that a 71-year-old man had been carrying for reasons Sol could not yet name. Gregorio Baiani, Chief Operations Officer, Baiani and Reyes Marine Engineering. The photograph was small, the color slightly faded, but the face was the face in the newspaper clipping she had found under Lola Nena's bed at 19. The face was her father's face. Amalia was reaching for the ID. Sol held onto it for one moment longer than she needed to. "Where did you get this?" she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Amalia frowned. She took the ID. "That's a company document, miss. Thank you for your help this evening." The door closed. Sol stood in the hallway. She had come this far. She had been 2 feet from a door that held the answer to the question she had been carrying for 26 years. She had let the door close. She walked to the end of the hallway. She turned around. She walked back to suite 1401 and knocked. Amalia opened it. Her expression said, "This is unexpected and not welcome." "I need to speak with Mr. Reyes," Sol said. "My name is Soledad Baiani. Gregorio Baiani was my father." The door did not close. Amalia looked at her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside. The suite's main room was large, the kind of room that looks out over the city through floor-to-ceiling glass. Rodrigo Reyes was standing at the window when Sol entered, his back to the room, looking at the lights of the Cebu port below. The port where Reyes marine ships had been docked for 30 years. He turned when he heard the door. He looked at Sol. On the wall beside the window, Sol saw it, a framed photograph, old, the kind that had been printed rather than digitally produced. 2 men, young, standing in front of a half-built ship hull in a dry dock. Both of them were smiling. One of them was Rodrigo Reyes, decades younger. The other was her father. Rodrigo Reyes said nothing. His mouth opened slightly and then closed. He looked like a man who has been waiting for something and has stopped believing it would arrive and has just been proven wrong so completely that believing it is difficult. One of the associates appeared in the doorway from the inner room. He saw Sol. He read the situation quickly and entirely incorrectly. He stepped into the hallway and called Ben. Sol did not turn around when Ben arrived. She did not turn around when the associate said something in a low voice. She looked at Rodrigo Reyes and said, "Please tell me what happened to my father." Rodrigo Reyes pressed his hand flat against the wall beside the photograph. His palm rested there. His eyes closed for a moment. Then the associate said, clearly enough for everyone to hear Ben, "Remove her from the floor." Rodrigo's eyes opened. He looked at his associate. He looked at Sol. He said, very quietly, "Wait." The associate stopped. Rodrigo looked at Sol for a long time. "Wait downstairs," he said. "I'll come to you." Ben pulled the security footage in the lobby while Sol sat in the chair he had indicated, the one that faced the elevator bank, the one where she could see the doors when they opened. "The footage is time-stamped," he said quietly, setting his tablet on his knee. "Whatever happened up there, I've got a record of it from both cameras." He paused. "I don't know what's going on, but if someone tries to say it went differently than it did, I've got what actually happened." Sol looked at him. He was 52, she thought, maybe older. He had the face of someone who had seen enough situations in this lobby to know when one of them mattered. "Why?" she said. He shrugged. It was the shrug of someone who has a simple answer and finds it slightly embarrassing to say. Because you had his name. And nobody carries someone's name like that if the story's simple. He looked at the elevator. Also, I knew a man named Bayani once, long time ago. Different man, probably. A pause. Or maybe not. Sol looked at him. He looked at the elevator. Neither of them said anything else. The elevator doors opened at 12:14 in the morning. Rodrigo Reyes stepped out. He had changed out of his jacket. He was wearing a plain white polo barong, the kind a man wears when he has decided to stop being formal. He was carrying the framed photograph from the wall of his suite. He sat down across from Sol. He set the photograph on the table between them. He said, he would have been 58 this year. Sol looked at the photograph. The two young men in front of the ship hull, smiling. He's gone, she said. Rodrigo looked at his hands. He died in Davao, 11 years ago. Heart failure. He was living quietly. He had a small boat repair business. He paused. He knew where you were. He knew about your grandmother. He never stopped knowing. Another pause. He never came back, because coming back would have required explaining. And explaining would have required telling a story that he had decided, 30 years ago, could not be told without harming people who didn't deserve harm. Sol was quiet. Tell me from the beginning, she said. 30 years ago, Bayani and Reyes Marine Engineering had been 8 years old. It had been founded by two men who had met at the Up College of Engineering. Rodrigo Reyes, the son of a Cebu businessman with capital to invest, and Gregorio Bayani, the son of a Tacloban fisherman with no capital and extraordinary technical ability. The partnership was simple. Rodrigo brought the money, Greg brought the engineering, and they had agreed from the first day that both names would be on the company because both men had built it, and the law of the company was that credit went where credit belonged. By its 8th year, Reyes Marine had 740 employees in 2 yards. It had government contracts for 3 Coast Guard vessels and 2 inter-island ferries. It was solvent, growing, and entirely unprepared for what was about to happen. The government contracts had been processed through a procurement official named Herrera, a man who had, over the course of 4 years, been quietly skimming a percentage of every contract that passed through his office. Not large percentages. Careful ones. The kind designed to remain below the audit threshold. He had been doing this with multiple companies. Reyes Marine was one of 6 firms he had compromised. The difference was that Greg Bayani, who handled all contract documentation personally, was the first person in any of those firms to notice. He noticed because he was the kind of engineer who read every number twice. He noticed a pattern in the disbursement schedules that didn't match the actual materials costs. He traced it back through 3 contract cycles. He found the shell accounts. He found Herrera's fingerprints on all of it. He brought it to Rodrigo on a Thursday evening in October. They sat in the office and looked at the documents and understood what they were holding. If they went to the authorities directly, Herrera's network, which Greg had found extended to 2 other procurement officials and 1 auditing firm, would be alerted before the case was complete. The assets would be moved. The evidence would evaporate. The company would be frozen pending investigation because the contaminated contracts would be voided. 740 workers would lose their jobs before Christmas. If they did nothing, the scheme continued. Greg sat with the documents for a long time. Then he asked Rodrigo one question. How long do you need to build a complete case? Rodrigo said, 6 months, maybe 8, if they could route the evidence through an international auditing firm that Herrera couldn't reach. Greg said, then you need 6 months of misdirection. Someone Herrera's people will follow away from the real trail. Rodrigo said he understood what Greg was suggesting, and he said no. Greg said, "It has to be me. I'm the one who found it. My name on the investigation is credible. If it's you, they'll know it's a legal strategy. If it's me, operations, no legal authority, no board position, they'll believe I went rogue. They'll follow me." Rodrigo said, "I won't let you do this." Greg said, "You don't get to decide. I do." He spent 6 days constructing the trail that Herrera's contacts would find, a sequence of document transfers, a set of transactions, a pattern that pointed unmistakably at Greg Bayani as the person who had been diverting funds. It was careful work. It required him to understand exactly how Herrera's people would investigate, and to give them exactly what they would look for. He gave Rodrigo a sealed envelope with his complete documentation of the real scheme, every name, every account, every transaction, and told him to route it to the international auditors the moment he was gone. He went home. He made the lanyard from paracord that he had been keeping in his workshop, a habit from his engineering days, braiding things with his hands when he needed to think. He gave it to his mother-in-law, Nena, who was raising his daughter in Tacloban. He did not say goodbye to Sol because Sol was 2 years old and would not remember it. He did not say goodbye to Alana, Sol's mother, because Alana had died 7 months earlier, and there was no one to say goodbye to. He told Nena, "When I'm not here to point the way, this will do." Nena kept the lanyard on her bedside table for 30 years. Greg disappeared before the case was formally filed. He did not go to Manila. He did not go abroad. He went to Davao and got quiet, and stayed quiet for 30 years. He read the newspapers. He watched the prosecutions unfold. 18 months after he disappeared, Herrera and his associates were arrested on charges that the government disclosed only partially, protecting the names of the companies that had cooperated. Reyes Marine was not named. Its contracts were preserved. 740 workers kept their jobs. Greg Bayani's name was never cleared, because clearing it officially required Rodrigo to go on record about a strategy that would have exposed the government's back-channel handling of the prosecutions. He had tried, twice, to find a way to do it. Both times, Greg had written to him, through a contact, unsigned but recognizable, and said, "Not yet. The network has people who would retaliate against the workers if this became public." Wait, he had died in Davao without the waiting being over. Rodrigo finished telling her at 2:17 in the morning. The lobby was empty, except for a night receptionist at the far desk, pretending not to listen, and Ben, who was sitting 2 chairs away and also pretending not to listen and making a much less convincing job of it. Sol had not said anything for 30 minutes. She was looking at the photograph on the table between them, her father at 30, in front of a ship he had helped design, smiling at the camera like a man with nothing to hide, which was accurate, because at that point he hadn't yet decided to carry everything. "The lanyard," she said finally. Rodrigo looked at her. "My grandmother keeps a lanyard on her bedside table. Braided paracord. She's never explained it. She just keeps it there." Sol looked at him. He made it the night before he left. Rodrigo pressed his lips together. He looked at the photograph. "He called it a compass," he said. "He told me once when we were young that his father, your great-grandfather, a fisherman, had said that a compass isn't a thing, it's a habit. The habit of knowing which direction is forward, no matter what the water's doing." He paused. He couldn't leave her a real compass. He didn't have one, so he left her the lanyard and trusted her to understand what it meant. Sol looked at the table. "She did understand," she said quietly. "She quoted him to me for 26 years without ever explaining where the words came from." Rodrigo looked at her. Something in his face shifted, not grief exactly, but the expression of a man who has been carrying a weight for 30 years and has been told, for the first time, that the thing he thought was lost had in fact been received. "He knew about you," Rodrigo said again. "After your mother passed, he wrote to Nena every year. Not signed, through a contact who had no connection to the case. I knew about the letters because he told me he sent them. He wanted to know you were all right. But he didn't come back. He couldn't come back without risking the prosecution of the people he had protected. And then, after Herrera's people were all convicted, after it was technically safe, Rodrigo stopped. He said coming back would have required you to know everything. And he was afraid that knowing everything would make you carry what he had carried. He thought it was better for you to wonder than to know." Sol was quiet for a moment. "He was wrong about that," she said. "But I understand why he thought it." The documents were unsealed 4 months later. Rodrigo had been building toward this for years, working with a retired government prosecutor who had been one of the original architects of the back-channel case against Herrera, who had long felt that the unofficial nature of the arrangement had done a particular injustice to the man who had made it possible. The release was not a press conference. It was a filing, a formal petition to the National Historical Commission to record the full account of the Herrera Network prosecution, including the role of Gregorio Baiani as the source of the evidence that led to the convictions. The petition included sworn statements from Rodrigo Reyes, 3 former government prosecutors, and the international auditing firm that had processed the evidence 30 years ago. It included Greg's original documentation of the scheme. It included the letters he had sent to Nena, which Nena, when Sol called to explain everything, had produced from a box under her bed that Sol had not known existed. The National Historical Commission accepted the petition. The record was amended. The newspapers covered it with the particular energy of a story that connects present accountability to past injustice. The kind of story that people share because it confirms something they want to believe about the world, that the truth, given enough time, and someone stubborn enough to pursue it, eventually surfaces. Gregorio Baiani, embezzler. That was what the record had said for 30 years. Gregorio Baiani, source and architect of the Herrera fraud prosecution. That was what it said now. The distinction was 30 years old and mattered completely. 6 months after the documents were unsealed, Reyes Marine held a ceremony at its main yard in Cebu. The company had voted, by a unanimous board decision, that Rodrigo had not directed or influenced, because he had recused himself and let it happen, to formally restore the company's original name, Baiani Reyes Marine Engineering. The new sign went up on a Thursday morning. Sol was there. She had taken the day off from the hotel. Her supervisor had given it without being asked for a reason, because she had worked there for 3 years and had never once taken a day off without a reason, and this was clearly a day that required no explanation. Lola Nina was there. She had flown from Tacloban, her first flight in 12 years, arranged by Rodrigo's office with a care that Nena had accepted gracefully and commented on only once, which was that the seat was more comfortable than she expected. She was 79 years old, and she stood in the Reyes Marine Yard in her good dress and watched the new sign go up on the building, where her son-in-law's name now appeared above the door, and she held the paracord lanyard in her hand and did not say anything for a long time. Then she looked at Sol. "He told me," she said, "that the right thing and the easy thing are almost never the same thing." She turned the lanyard over in her fingers. He chose the right one. He knew what it cost. He chose it anyway. Sol took the lanyard from her grandmother's hand. She held it for a moment. She felt the braid under her fingers, paracord, tight and even, made with the hands of an engineer who braided things when he needed to think. She looked at the sign. Bayani Reyes Marine Engineering, her father's name. Above a door. 30 years after it was removed. She thought about a man in Davao, alone, reading newspapers, watching prosecutions unfold, writing unsigned letters to a grandmother in Tacloban, and receiving nothing in return, because receiving something would have meant acknowledging where he was. She thought about what it costs to carry a secret, not because it protects you, but because releasing it would harm people who don't deserve harm. She thought about what Rodrigo had said when she asked him, in the hotel lobby at 2 a.m, whether her father had known he would never see his name restored. Rodrigo had been quiet for a moment. Then he had said, he told me something, near the end. He said, I don't need the name back. The name was never the thing. The thing was the workers going home to their families. The thing was Nina raising Sol in a house that didn't collapse. The thing was being the kind of man your daughter could respect when she finally understood. That's all I ever wanted. The Gregorio Bayani Maritime Foundation was established the following year. Its purpose was simple: full scholarships for children of maritime workers, welders, engineers, sailors, dry dock workers, the people whose labor built the ships and whose names appeared nowhere in the public record of the industry. Sol served as its director. She had finished her accounting degree. She had quit the hotel, not dramatically, with a proper notice and a proper handover, because she had been trained to do things properly and had taken the foundation role with the same steadiness she had brought to everything since she was 3 years old, and Lola Nina had decided that loneliness was too heavy a name for a baby, and called her Sol instead. At the foundation's inaugural dinner, someone asked her what her father had left behind. She held the lanyard in her hand. She had worn it on her wrist every day since the ceremony at the yard. Not an inheritance, she said. A direction. She looked at the lanyard. He left us the habit of knowing which way is forward, no matter what the water's doing. She smiled. It turns out that's enough. Ben Tagalog attended the inaugural dinner. He had not been invited through any official channel. He had found out about it from a Cebu business newsletter that had covered the foundation's establishment, and he had called Sol's office and asked, very simply, whether there was room for one more. There was. He sat at a table near the back, which was where he had always preferred to sit. Because near the back you could see the whole room, and nobody was looking at you. After the dinner, Sol found him by the exit. You said something, she said. That night in the lobby. You said you knew a man named Bayani once. Ben was quiet for a moment. He helped me find a job, Ben said. When I was 22. I was new to Cebu. I didn't know anyone. A man at the port. He was older than me, maybe 30. He saw me looking at the job board outside the shipping yard. He asked me what I was looking for. I told him. He walked me inside and introduced me to the yard supervisor and told him I was a good person to hire. Ben paused. He didn't know me. He just decided I was a good person to help. Sol looked at him. I never knew his name, Ben said. He didn't offer it. He just did it and walked away. He paused. But he had an engineer's way of looking at things, like he was already seeing the solution before the problem was finished. He looked at the lanyard on Sol's wrist. I've thought about him many times over the years. Sol turned the lanyard over on her wrist. She thought about a man who braided paracord when he needed to think, who walked into a shipyard and decided a stranger was worth helping, who chose the right thing over the easy thing in a way that cost him everything and had never once, as far as she could tell, regretted it. I think, she said. That was him. Ben looked at the lanyard. He looked at Sol. He nodded once, the nod of a man who has been carrying a 30-year gratitude and has finally found somewhere to put it. Before I end this story, I'd like to leave you with this. Gregorio Baiani made his choice in a week in October 30 years ago. He had time to think about it, 6 days. The 6 days he spent building the trail that would lead investigators toward him and away from the evidence Rodrigo needed to build the real case. He knew what it would cost. He was an engineer. He calculated things. He calculated that 740 families were worth his name, that his daughter, raised by a strong woman in Tacloban, would be all right without him, that the truth, if he gave Rodrigo time and evidence and cover, would eventually surface and do what truth does when it finally has room. He calculated that the right thing and the easy thing were not the same thing. And he chose. Lola Nena raised Sol on one sentence from a man she loved and lost. The right thing and the easy thing are almost never the same thing. A man is measured by which one he chooses when no one is watching. Greg Baiani made his choice when no one was watching. A lobby in Cebu, 30 years later, and a daughter who refused to let the door close. That was the watching that finally came. He did not know it would come. He chose anyway. That is the whole story. Everything else is the consequence of that one choice, rippling forward through 30 years and into a shipyard sign and a foundation and a grandmother on her first flight in 12 years, holding a paracord lanyard and watching her granddaughter receive what her son-in-law sent forward across 3 decades of silence. The next time you face the moment where the right thing and the easy thing diverge, where choosing right costs something real, remember a man named Gregorio. He never got to see his name restored. He knew it might not be. He chose anyway. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.